The space between stars held secrets that mortals were never meant to discover. Yet Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Dawn, watching the endless dark with eyes that refused to accept limits. His ship carried 15,000 souls toward a new world in the Kepler system, all of them believing they were alone in their journey across the void. They had no idea that beings of immense power watched their every move from a realm that existed beyond the normal rules of space and time. In the ethereal plane of the Celestial Council, ancient entities gathered around a viewing portal that showed the human fleet as tiny specks of light crawling through the cosmic dark. These beings had guided younger races for millions of years, shepherding them through the dangerous early stages of space travel and technological development. They called themselves gods, though they remembered a time when they too had been mortal creatures struggling against impossible odds. Valdris stood at the center of the divine assembly, his form shifting between pure energy and something almost human in shape. He had overseen the testing of 43 different species, watching as each one eventually submitted to divine guidance or perished in the attempt to resist overwhelming forces. The pattern never changed, until now. The humans approached the first trial, announced Celesta, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Shall we prepare the usual welcome for them? Valdris studied the readings from their observation devices, noting how the human ships moved in perfect formation despite the vast distances between them. Other species had shown fear or wonder when approaching the testing grounds, but the humans seemed almost eager to investigate whatever waited for them in the Kepler system. They interest me, Valdris said, his ancient mind reviewing the data they had collected about humanity over the past 1,000 years. They have faced challenges that would have broken most species, yet they continue to push forward into the unknown. The humans had survived wars that should have destroyed their civilization, plagues that should have ended their species, and natural disasters that should have sent them crawling back to their caves. Instead, each challenge seemed to make them stronger and more determined to reach for the stars. Lieutenant Amy Carter worked in the engine room of the New Dawn, her hands moving across control panels with the confidence of someone who had spent years learning every detail of the ship's systems. She was the first to notice the strange energy readings as they approached their destination, patterns that made no sense according to everything humanity knew about physics. Commander Morrison to engineering, her radio crackled. What are you seeing down there, Amy? Something big, sir, she replied, checking her readings again to make sure she was not making a mistake. We're picking up energy signatures that shouldn't be possible. Whatever is out there, it's using power sources we've never seen before. Dr. Peter Brooks bent over his instruments in the science lab, his eyes wide with excitement as he studied the data streaming in from their long-range sensors. The readings suggested a structure of incredible size orbiting the system's star, something that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built or even imagined. This changes everything, he whispered to his assistant, Dr. Helen Rogers. We're looking at technology that's thousands of years ahead of ours, maybe tens of thousands. The Divine Council watched as the humans reacted to their first glimpse of the testing facility. Previous species had either fled in terror or attempted to send communications toward the structure, hoping to make peaceful contact with whoever had built it. The gods expected humanity to follow the same pattern. Instead, Commander Morrison called a meeting of his senior staff and began planning an investigation. He showed no fear of the unknown structure, only curiosity about how it worked and what secrets it might hold. His chief engineer began calculating how close they could safely approach, while his science officer started preparing detailed scans of the alien technology. Fascinating, muttered Kronos, one of the older gods who had witnessed the rise and fall of entire galactic civilizations. They show no desire to seek our guidance. Most species would be praying to any higher power that might be listening by now. The human fleet continued its approach toward the ring structure, maintaining course despite energy readings that would have sent most species running back to their homeworlds. Commander Morrison stood on his bridge, studying the tactical displays that showed the massive alien construct growing larger with each passing hour. Whatever built this thing wanted to be noticed, he said to his tactical officer, Captain Lisa Garcia. The question is whether they're still around and what they want from visitors. The gods prepared to activate the first phase of their testing protocol, confident that humanity would soon join the long list of species that had learned to accept divine guidance. They had no idea they were about to encounter something that would challenge their understanding of mortal nature and force them to question everything they thought they knew about the relationship between gods and the creatures they had sworn to protect. The New Dawn and her escort ships moved steadily toward their destiny, carrying 15,000 humans who refused to believe that any challenge was too great to overcome through courage, intelligence, and determination behind them. The gods watched and waited, preparing to begin a test that would surprise them far more than it would the humans they intended to judge. The ring structure activated as the human fleet drew within scanning range, its surface suddenly blazing with lights that formed complex patterns across its massive circumference. Captain Lisa Garcia commanded the escort vessel Eagle's Flight, as it took point position leading the reconnaissance mission toward what was clearly an artificial construct of impossible scale and beauty. "Sir, we're reading multiple energy spikes across the structure," reported her sensor operator, Chief Petty Officer Kevin Blake. "It's like the whole thing just woke up and noticed us." The Divine Council watched from their ethereal realm as the testing facility came online, preparing to subject humanity to the same trials that had broken the will of countless other species. The first challenge materialized as a series of spatial distortions that created maze-like passages through seemingly empty space, each path designed to trap explorers in loops of twisted reality. Commander Morrison studied the tactical display as the space around his fleet began to warp and shift, creating corridors and barriers where none had existed moments before. Other species had seen these manifestations and immediately recognized them as beyond mortal comprehension, leading them to cry out for divine intervention. "Looks like someone wants to play games," Morrison said calmly, turning to his science officer, Dr. Brooks. "What do you make of this?" "The spatial distortions follow mathematical patterns," Dr. Peter Brooks replied, his fingers dancing across his instruments as he analyzed the phenomenon. "Complex ones, but still based on principles we can understand. It's like a three-dimensional puzzle designed to test navigation and problem-solving skills." Dr. Susan Wells moved through the ship's corridors, checking on crew members as reports of the strange manifestation spread throughout the fleet. As the chief psychologist, she had expected panic or at least serious anxiety when faced with technology so far beyond human capabilities. Instead, she found excitement and curiosity. "This is incredible," said Engineer Third Class Danny Clark, his face pressed against an observation port as he watched space itself bend and twist around their ships. "How do you think they do it? Some kind of gravity manipulation, maybe?" The gods had designed the spatial maze to induce despair through its seemingly impossible nature, but the humans treated it as an intellectual challenge. Chief Petty Officer Kevin Blake began deploying quantum entanglement markers, creating a trail of breadcrumbs that would allow them to map the distorted space and find their way through the maze. "Brilliant," whispered Valdris as he watched the human solution unfold. "They're not trying to escape the challenge or seeking divine assistance. They're actually trying to understand how it works." The first probe ship entered the spatial maze, under Captain Garcia's command, with Dr. Brooks monitoring every instrument reading as they navigated the twisted passages. The walls of the maze showed visions designed to break the spirit, images of failure and destruction that had sent other species fleeing in terror. Instead of being intimidated, the human crew began documenting everything they saw. They recorded the images, analyzed the psychological techniques being used, and even started discussing how the illusions were being projected into their minds. "It's some kind of telepathic projection system," Dr. Susan Wells observed as she studied the data. "Sophistication, but once you know what you're looking at, you can build mental defenses against it." She began teaching the crew meditation techniques and group support methods that helped them maintain their mental stability while navigating the maze. The gods watched in growing amazement as humanity developed countermeasures to psychological attacks that had never failed before. Sergeant Tony Rodriguez led a ground team that discovered something unexpected within the maze structure. Ancient inscriptions covered hidden walls, messages left by previous species that had attempted the trials. Most spoke of calling out to the ones who watch for salvation, begging for divine intervention to save them from the impossible challenges. "Look at this," Rodriguez said, running his scanner over the alien text. "These guys were in the same situation we are, but instead of figuring it out, they just gave up and started praying." The humans interpreted the inscriptions as warnings about some kind of test, making them more determined to succeed through their own efforts rather than seeking help from unknown higher powers. They had no idea that the ones who watched were the very beings who had created the trials. Engineer Third Class Nancy Price made a breakthrough when she realized that the spatial distortions were being generated by exotic matter manipulators, Hidden throughout the structure, her team began reverse engineering the technology, studying how it worked rather than simply trying to escape its effects. "We could build something like this ourselves," she reported to Commander Morrison. "It would take years of research and development, but the principles are sound. We just need to understand the exotic matter physics better." The Divine Council found themselves facing something unprecedented. Every other species had either failed the trials completely or eventually broken down and begged for divine guidance. The gods had expected to reveal themselves as benevolent saviors, offering protection and advanced knowledge in exchange for worship and obedience. Instead, humanity was treating the divine testing facility as a learning opportunity. They mapped the maze, documented its technology, and developed their own solutions to challenges that were supposed to be impossible for mortal minds to comprehend. "They're not supposed to be able to do this," said Celesta, her voice filled with uncertainty. The trials were designed to demonstrate the futility of mortal efforts against divine power. Captain Garcia's probe ship emerged from the other side of the spatial maze, having successfully navigated all of its challenges through human ingenuity and determination. Her crew had not only survived the trial but had learned valuable information about the technology that created it. "Mission accomplished," she reported to Commander Morrison. "We've mapped the entire structure and identified multiple ways to safely guide the fleet through. Oh, and Dr. Brooks thinks he knows how to build our own spatial manipulation device." The first trial was complete, but not in the way the gods had intended. Humanity had passed their test without seeking divine intervention, demonstrating a level of independence and problem-solving ability that challenged everything the gods thought they knew about mortal races. Valdris stared at the viewing portal, watching as human ships began moving through the spatial maze with confidence and purpose. For the first time in eons, he wondered if the gods had been approaching their relationship with younger species all wrong. The Divine Council convened an emergency session after witnessing humanity's unexpected success with the first trial. Valdris stood before his fellow gods, his ancient mind struggling to process what they had observed. Never in millions of years had a species navigated their tests without eventually crying out for divine salvation. "We must escalate," declared Kronos, his voice carrying the weight of eons. "Perhaps the first trial was too simple for these humans. We shall show them true divine power and force them to acknowledge their need for our guidance." The ring structure began its transformation, shifting from a testing maze into something far more sinister. Weapon systems that could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality emerged from hidden compartments, while automated fleets launched from docking bays that had been invisible moments before. The gods had decided to demonstrate the futility of mortal resistance through overwhelming force. Admiral Connor Hayes took command of the human defense as warning alarms blared throughout the fleet. The enemy vessels approaching them were unlike anything in human experience, their hulls shifting between dimensions and their weapons charging with energies that made space itself tremble. "All ships, battle stations," Hayes commanded, his voice steady despite facing odds that any rational analysis would call hopeless. "We've seen impossible things before, and we're still here. Let's show our new friends what humans do when someone tries to intimidate us." The first wave of divine weapons struck the human fleet with forces that should have vaporized any mortal vessel. Instead, Chief Engineer Amy Carter had managed to modify their shield systems using principles learned from studying the spatial maze, creating protective barriers that bent reality around the ships rather than simply absorbing energy. "Shields holding at 70%. She reported from her engineering station. "The modifications are working, but I don't know how long we can keep this up against weapons that powerful." Dr. Nancy Price worked frantically in her improvised laboratory, studying readings from the enemy weapons and looking for weaknesses in technology that was thousands of years beyond human understanding. Her team had captured debris from the spatial maze and were using it to develop countermeasures that should have been impossible. "The weapon systems operate on predictable patterns," she announced over the fleet communication system. "They're incredibly advanced, but they follow rules. If we can figure out those rules, we can find ways to defeat them." Private First Class Danny Clark found himself trapped aboard a damaged research station that was being systematically destroyed by divine weapons. His squad had been cut off during the initial attack, with no hope of rescue and their life support systems failing. Any reasonable person would have accepted the inevitable and spent their final moments praying for salvation. Instead, Clark began stripping components from damaged equipment and jury-rigging an escape pod from debris and spare parts. His improvised solution violated several laws of physics and most principles of engineering, but it worked well enough to get his team to safety while providing valuable intelligence about enemy weapon patterns. "Control, this is Clark," he reported, as his makeshift escape pod limped toward the main fleet. "I've got data on how their targeting systems work. The weapons are incredibly powerful, but they're designed to fight conventional threats. They don't know how to handle completely irrational responses." The gods watched in growing alarm as humanity refused to break under pressure that had shattered the resistance of every other species they had tested. The humans were not just surviving the divine assault, they were learning from it and developing increasingly creative countermeasures. Captain Greg Young commanded a wing of fighter craft that had been modified with Dr. Price's theoretical improvements. His pilots were outnumbered 1,000 to 1 and facing weapons that could erase them from existence, but their response was to attack rather than retreat. "Remember, these guys expect us to fight like normal people," Young told his squadron. "Good thing we're not normal people. Follow my lead and let's give them something they won't expect." His fighters began using kamikaze tactics, but not in the way the gods anticipated. Instead of simple suicide runs, each attack delivered computer viruses developed by human programmers who had studied the divine technology. The viruses were based on principles of controlled chaos, designed to exploit the rigid perfection of systems that had never encountered truly random. INPUT, Dr. Marcus Webb worked with a team of xenobiologists to analyze the enemy vessels, treating them as a form of advanced life rather than simple machines. His approach led to the discovery that the divine technology was partly organic, which explained its incredible capabilities but also revealed potential vulnerabilities. "They're not just ships," Webb reported to Admiral Hayes. "They're living beings merged with technology in ways we're only beginning to understand. That means they can be confused, distracted, even infected with the right kind of biological agent." The human fleet began deploying weapons that no sane military strategist would have approved. Fighters loaded with modified bacteria attacked vessels that existed partially outside normal spacetime. Research teams fired experimental devices that created random, quantum fluctuations designed to confuse targeting systems that relied on predicting probable outcomes. Valdris found himself experiencing something he had not felt in eons of existence: uncertainty. The human response to divine power was unlike anything in the records of 43 previous species. Where others had shown terror and desperation, humanity displayed curiosity and determination. "They're not trying to defeat us," he realized, watching as human scientists continued studying divine technology even while under attack. "They're trying to understand us. They think we're just another species with advanced technology." The battle reached its climax when Lieutenant Colonel Janet Stone led a boarding party that infiltrated one of the divine vessels. Her team moved through corridors that shifted between dimensions, facing security systems that attacked the mind as well as the body. Instead of being overwhelmed, they began taking detailed scans and samples of everything they encountered. "This is incredible," Stone reported as her team fought their way through a vessel that was larger inside than outside. "The technology here could revolutionize everything we know about physics. We need to get this data back to our scientists." The gods realized that their test was failing in ways they had never imagined. Humanity was not being broken by divine power, they were being educated by it. Every weapon fired at them became a learning opportunity. Every impossible challenge became a puzzle to solve. Admiral Hayes coordinated his fleet's response to what should have been an overwhelming assault, but his tactical displays showed something the gods had not expected. Human casualties were surprisingly light for a battle against impossible odds, and morale remained high throughout the fleet. His people were treating the conflict as an exciting challenge rather than a hopeless struggle. "All ships, prepare for the next phase," Hayes announced. "Whatever our new friends throw at us next, we'll figure out how to handle it. That's what humans do." The divine construct began showing signs of system failure as human ingenuity proved more adaptable than the gods had ever anticipated. Sparks of exotic energy cascaded across its surface while automated systems struggled to process responses that fell outside their programming parameters. The gods found themselves facing a crisis they had never experienced in millions of years of testing younger species. Valdris made a decision that shocked the entire Celestial Council. Instead of escalating the conflict further, he chose to reveal himself directly to the humans, confident that the sight of true divine power would finally break their stubborn independence and force them to seek proper guidance. His manifestation appeared before the human fleet as a being of pure energy and impossible beauty. radiating power that made space itself tremble with reverence. Other species had fallen to their knees at this moment, overwhelmed by the presence of divinity and desperate to worship beings so far beyond mortal comprehension. "Greetings, children of Earth." Valdris spoke directly into the minds of every human in the fleet, his voice carrying harmonics that touched the soul. "I am Valdris, guardian of this sector, observer of young races as they take their first steps into the cosmos. You have shown remarkable courage in facing my trials." Commander Morrison stood on his bridge, studying the being that had appeared before them with the same analytical curiosity he had shown toward every other phenomenon they had encountered. His response sent shockwaves through the Divine Council. "Thank you for the introduction, Valdris," Morrison replied calmly. "We appreciate your interest in our species and the challenges you've provided. They've been excellent learning experiences. However, we prefer to find our own path forward, even if it takes longer than accepting help from more advanced beings." The gods stared in stunned silence as humanity politely declined divine intervention. No species in their records had ever responded to the offer of divine guidance with anything other than grateful acceptance or terrified submission. Engineering Chief Rachel Ford and her team were busy conducting detailed scans of Valdris himself, treating the manifestation of divine power as a fascinating scientific phenomenon rather than a religious experience. Their instruments recorded energy patterns and dimensional mechanics that would advance human understanding of physics by centuries. "This is incredible data," Ford reported to Dr. Brooks. "The energy manipulation techniques he's using could revolutionize our power systems. Look at these readings on dimensional folding and exotic matter manipulation." Dr. Marcus Webb approached the situation from his perspective as a xenobiologist, theorizing that Valdris and his people might be representative of an ancient species that had achieved technological transcendence. He began preparing questions about their evolution and development rather than prayers for guidance. "Sir, I'd like to request permission to conduct a formal first contact interview," Webb said to Commander Morrison. "This could be the greatest scientific opportunity in human history. We need to document everything about their biology and technology." The Divine Council found themselves in completely uncharted territory. Valdris had expected humanity to either cower in fear or fall to their knees in worship, but instead they were treating him like an interesting research subject. Their respectful but firm rejection of divine authority created a philosophical crisis that shook the foundations of celestial understanding. "How do we respond to beings who refuse to be guided?" asked Celesta, her voice filled with uncertainty. "Every other species has eventually accepted our wisdom and protection. These humans act as if they consider themselves our equals." Lieutenant Colonel Janet Stone led another boarding party during the confusion caused by Valdris's manifestation, this time targeting sections of the divine construct that contained what appeared to be historical records. Her team moved through corridors filled with the accumulated knowledge of 43 previous species, all of whom had eventually submitted to divine will. "Look at this," said Sergeant Tony Rodriguez as he examined alien inscriptions that told the story of other young races. "Every single one of them eventually gave up and let these gods take care of everything. No wonder they never developed beyond a certain point." The humans began to understand that they were not the first species to face these trials, but they appeared to be the first to consistently refuse divine salvation. The records showed a pattern of young races being tested, breaking under pressure, and then becoming permanent dependents of their divine guardians. Dr. Helen Rogers made a startling discovery while analyzing the data recovered from the construct. The gods themselves appeared to be bound by rules and limitations that suggested they were not the ultimate arbiters of the universe they claimed to be. "They're powerful, but not omnipotent," she reported to the assembled science team. "There are gaps in their knowledge, areas where they seem as puzzled as we are. I think they might be products of the same kind of evolutionary process that created us, just much further along." The revelations spread through the human fleet, but instead of diminishing their respect for the gods, it increased their fascination. Chief Warrant Officer Bill Davis began developing new scanning techniques specifically designed to study divine manifestations, approaching the gods as an advanced form of life rather than supernatural beings. Valdris experienced something he had not felt in eons of existence: genuine uncertainty about his purpose and methods. Humanity's approach forced him to question fundamental assumptions about the relationship between divine and mortal beings. Were the gods helping younger races by offering easy solutions, or were they preventing them from reaching their full potential? "You interest me greatly," Valdris admitted to Commander Morrison during a private communication. Your species responds to challenges in ways I have never observed. Most races seek guidance when faced with obstacles beyond their immediate understanding. You seek comprehension. We've learned that the only way to truly understand something is to figure it out for ourselves, Morrison replied. Accepting easy answers might solve immediate problems, but it doesn't help us grow as a species. We'd rather struggle and learn than be comfortable and dependent. Captain Maria Lopez discovered that the testing facility had been recording not just human responses but divine reactions as well throughout the entire encounter. The data suggested that the trials might have been as much about testing the gods themselves as about evaluating younger races. I think this whole situation has been a learning experience for both sides, Lopez reported to Admiral Hayes. They've been watching us, but we've been teaching them things they didn't know about themselves. The Divine Council faced an unprecedented crisis as their subjects refused to become subjects, treating their gods as colleagues and exploring the universe's mysteries rather than as supreme authorities to be obeyed. For the first time in their existence, the gods began to wonder if their traditional approach to guiding younger races might be fundamentally flawed. Valdres found himself genuinely curious about where this unprecedented relationship might lead, while humanity continued to treat every aspect of their encounter with the divine as an opportunity to learn and grow rather than a reason to abandon their independence. The Celestial Council fractured into heated debate as gods who had worked together for millions of years found themselves questioning the very foundations of their existence. Valdres stood at the center of the cosmic storm, defending ideas that would have been unthinkable before humanity entered their testing facility. These mortals are teaching us, Valdres declared to his fellow divinities, his words causing ripples of shock through the ethereal realm. Their refusal to accept easy answers has forced me to examine our methods. Perhaps we have been limiting younger races instead of helping them reach their potential. Kronos rose in opposition, his ancient form blazing with indignation. We have guided 43 species to prosperity and peace under our protection. These humans are aberrant, dangerous in their stubborn independence. They must be made to understand their place in the cosmic order. While the gods argued among themselves, Colonel Steve Barnes coordinated a fleet-wide effort to study their divine observers as thoroughly as possible. Human scientists had turned their instruments toward beings who had never before been subjected to mortal scrutiny, treating divinity itself as a phenomenon to be investigated and understood. "We're getting incredible readings," reported Dr. Patricia Hayes as she analyzed data streams that would have been impossible to collect before Valdres revealed himself. "Their energy signatures follow patterns we can map and predict. They're not operating outside the laws of physics, they're just using principles we haven't discovered yet." The humans approached the gods with the same scientific curiosity they applied to every other mystery in the universe. Instead of worship or fear, they offered collaboration and friendship, treating beings of immense power as colleagues rather than masters. Dr. Helen Rogers made another breakthrough while studying the divine energy patterns. The gods appeared to be bound by limitations that prevented them from directly interfering with certain cosmic processes, suggesting they answered to rules and authorities even higher than themselves. "They're not the top of the hierarchy," she announced to the assembled research team. "There are forces in the universe that even the gods must respect. They're explorers and students just like us. They've just been at it longer." Chief Warrant Officer Bill Davis successfully developed scanning techniques that could analyze divine manifestations in real time, providing data that revealed the mechanical principles underlying what appeared to be miraculous powers. His work proved that godlike abilities were based on advanced technology and understanding rather than supernatural forces. The revelation that the gods were not truly omnipotent spread through the human fleet, but instead of diminishing their respect for these ancient beings, it made them more interested in establishing meaningful relationships. The humans began to see the gods as potential teachers and partners rather than distant authorities. Valdres found himself drawn into conversations with human scientists who asked questions that forced him to examine assumptions he had held for eons. Dr. Marcus Webb wanted to understand divine evolution and development, while Dr. Brooks sought to learn about technologies that could benefit both species. "Your approach to existence fascinates me," Valdres admitted during a lengthy discussion with Commander Morrison. "You face the unknown with curiosity rather than fear, seeing every challenge as an opportunity to grow. Most species eventually reach a point where they prefer security to discovery." "Security is important," Morrison agreed, "but it shouldn't come at the cost of growth and independence. We'd rather face the dangers of the universe as free beings than live safely as dependents of more powerful species." Captain Maria Lopez, discovered that the testing facility contained archives showing the current status of all 43 previous species that had undergone divine trials. The records revealed a disturbing pattern of stagnation and decline among races that had accepted divine protection. They're all still alive and comfortable, Lopez reported to Admiral Hayes, but none of them have made significant technological or cultural advances in thousands of years. It's like accepting divine guidance caused them to stop trying to improve themselves. The data suggested that divine protection, while well-intentioned, had actually prevented younger races from reaching their full potential. By providing easy solutions to difficult problems, the gods had inadvertently created permanent dependency relationships that stunted growth and development. Technical. Sergeant Roy Campbell began working directly with manifestations of divine energy to understand the advanced technologies the gods employed. Instead of being granted divine gifts, Campbell earned comprehension through careful study and experimentation, creating a new model for interaction between mortal and divine beings. It's like learning any other advanced technology, Campbell explained to his engineering team. Difficult and time-consuming, but not impossible if you're willing to put in the effort. The gods didn't get this knowledge instantly either. They had to develop it over millions of years. The other gods watched in growing alarm as Valdris began to openly question their traditional methods. Celesta attempted to maintain order in the council, but found herself also affected by humanity's unexpected responses to divine authority. Perhaps Valdris is correct, she said hesitantly. These humans have achieved things that should have been impossible for a species at their level of development. Their independence might be a strength rather than a weakness. The Divine Council found itself divided between those who wanted to force humanity into the traditional pattern of submission and those who were beginning to see value in the human approach to existence. The debate raged through dimensions that mortal minds could barely comprehend. Meanwhile, the humans continued their research and exploration as if the fate of their species was not being decided by cosmic beings of immense power. They treated the entire situation as an interesting first contact scenario, documenting everything and looking for ways to learn from their encounter with advanced intelligences. Dr. Susan Wells observed that interaction with the gods was actually strengthening human unity and purpose rather than creating the fear and dependency that divine intervention usually produced. The crews were working together more effectively than ever, inspired by the challenges they faced and the knowledge they were gaining. "They're not breaking us," Wells reported to Commander Morrison. "If anything, this experience is making us stronger and more confident in our abilities. We're proving to ourselves that no challenge is too great if we work together and refuse to give up." Valdris began to understand that humanity's greatest gift to the universe might be their demonstration. That growth comes from struggle and that some problems are worth solving independently rather than accepting easy solutions from higher authorities. The humans were teaching their gods that diversity of approach and independence of thought might be more valuable than uniform submission to divine will. The cosmic debate continued as both sides prepared for a final confrontation that would determine not just humanity's fate, but the future relationship between mortal and divine beings throughout the galaxy. The moment of truth arrived when Valdris manifested before the human fleet one final time, but his appearance was different from before. Instead of radiating overwhelming divine authority, he approached as a seeker of understanding, his cosmic form somehow conveying humility despite its immense power. "Commander Morrison," Valdris said, his voice carrying none of the commanding presence that had marked their first encounter, "I must admit something that no god has ever acknowledged to a mortal species. Your people have taught us something we did not know about ourselves and our purpose in the universe." The Divine Council gathered in the space around the human fleet, their ethereal forms visible to mortal eyes for the first time in cosmic history. Each god radiated different emotions, from Kronos' continued resistance to change, to Celesta's growing curiosity about human methods. Commander Morrison stood on his bridge surrounded by his senior staff, facing beings of incredible power with the same calm dignity he had shown throughout their entire encounter. His response would determine not just humanity's future, but the relationship between mortal and divine beings throughout the galaxy. "We're honored that our actions have provided you with new perspectives," Morrison replied. "We've learned an incredible amount from this encounter as well. Perhaps the real purpose of your trials was not to test us, but to help both our species understand that there are many ways to approach the challenges of existence." Dr. Patricia Hayes stepped forward, with a proposal that would have been unthinkable at the beginning of their encounter. She suggested formal cooperation between human and divine scientists, not as a relationship between superior and inferior beings, but as partners exploring mysteries that neither side could solve alone. We have different strengths, Hayes explained, to the assembled gods. Your people have advanced technology and cosmic perspective, while we bring fresh approaches and willingness to take risks. Together we might discover things that neither side could find independently. The testing facility began its final transformation, shifting from a weapon of divine judgment into something entirely new. Technical Sergeant Roy Campbell worked alongside manifestations of divine energy to understand how mortal ingenuity and cosmic power could be combined in ways that benefited both sides. It's incredible, Campbell reported as he watched human and divine technologies merge in ways that created capabilities beyond what either side possessed alone. We're not just learning from each other, we're creating something completely new. Valdris revealed the truth that had been hidden throughout their encounter. The gods themselves were products of a similar testing process, having once been mortal beings who faced trials designed by even more ancient powers. They had assumed that guiding younger races through divine intervention was their purpose, but humanity's response suggested a different possibility. We accepted guidance when our time came, Valdris explained to the assembled humans. It seemed like wisdom at the time, but perhaps we lost something important in the process. You have shown us that independence and struggle might be more valuable than comfort and protection. The records of 43 previous species were open to human examination, revealing the long-term consequences of accepting divine guidance. Each race had achieved peace and prosperity under divine protection, but had also stopped growing and developing as independent civilizations. Dr. Marcus Webb studied the data with growing understanding. They all reached a plateau, he observed, comfortable, safe, but no longer pushing the boundaries of what was possible. They traded their potential for security. The revelation forced both sides to confront fundamental questions about growth, independence, and the purpose of existence. The gods realized they might have been preventing younger races from reaching their full potential by offering easy solutions to difficult problems, Captain. Lisa Garcia proposed a new model for divine-mortal relations based on humanity's experience. Instead of protection and guidance, the gods could offer knowledge and resources that species would have to earn through their own efforts and understanding. Help us learn, but don't give us answers, Garcia suggested. Let us struggle and grow, and discover things for ourselves. Be teachers and partners rather than protectors and guides. The transformation of the testing facility accelerated as both human and divine engineers worked together to create something unprecedented. A collaborative research station where mortal and divine beings could explore the universe's greatest mysteries as equals. Valdris made a declaration that shocked the cosmic order. He announced the first treaty between equals in the recorded history of divine-mortal relations, recognizing humanity as partners rather than subjects in the exploration of existence. You have earned the right to walk your own path, Valdris told Commander Morrison, but you have also shown us that our paths might be more interesting if we travel them together. The treaty established new principles for interaction between advanced and developing species throughout the galaxy. Instead of automatic divine intervention, younger races would be offered opportunities to learn and grow through their own efforts, with guidance available but not imposed. Technical Sergeant Roy Campbell worked with divine engineers to design new vessels that combined human creativity with cosmic technology. The ships would be crewed by beings both mortal and divine, exploring regions of space where their combined strengths would be needed to face unknown challenges. Dr. Susan Wells observed that the entire experience had strengthened humanity's confidence in their ability to face any challenge the universe might present. They had proven to themselves and to cosmic powers that no obstacle was too great if approached with determination and ingenuity. We've shown that being human means never accepting that something is impossible, Wells reported to the fleet. That's our gift to the universe, the refusal to believe that any problem is beyond solution if you're willing to work at it. The story concluded with new ships launching from the transformed facility. Vessels created through collaboration between human ingenuity and divine power, their crews prepared to face mysteries that neither species could handle alone, heading toward unexplored regions where their combined strengths would be tested, against challenges that existed beyond the current understanding of both mortals and gods. Commander Morrison stood on the bridge of the first hybrid vessel, watching stars that no human or god had ever visited before. Beside him, Valdris existed in a form that bridged the gap between divine energy and mortal understanding, both beings excited by the unknown adventures that waited in the cosmic dark. The gods had learned that their greatest purpose was not to protect younger races from struggle, but to ensure that no species had to face the universe's challenges completely alone. Humanity had taught them that diversity of thought and independence of spirit were more valuable than uniform submission to higher authority, and that some discoveries could only be made by beings willing to risk everything for the chance to grow beyond their current limitations.